What if you could live in your house for free or even make money just by living there? It's not a gimmick, it's called house hacking, and it's how everyday people are turning their homes into income machines by adding an accessory dwelling unit or ADU to their property. The best part, you can even house hack by using the bank's money. In this video, I'll break down what house hacking is, how it works, why it might be the smartest way for you to save money, build wealth, or even live mortgage free. I'll tell you about 3 people I personally know that are house hacking right now with an ADU. We're also going to have a special guest, Morgan Harris with Guild Mortgage, and she's going to talk about how you can house hack with a 3.5% down payment. Stick around to the end. I'll share how to avoid the biggest mistake first-time house hackers make. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Erin. I'm a real estate agent. I am passionate about alternative and affordable housing. I create content. I want to help you learn about ADUs, tiny homes, and really maximizing those smaller spaces. So let's talk about what house hacking is. It's when you live in a property, but you also use part of it to generate rental income. It's a way to turn your home into an asset that actually works for you. Some people rent it out on a short-term basis, some people on a long-term basis. It really just depends on your goals and the opportunity that you have with the property. So you become a landlord. You're essentially a small business owner. And those people that are house hacking, they're helping cover all or part of their mortgage and living expenses. Now, there are several ways to house hack. The most common, people think of a duplex, triplex, fourplex. You live in a unit, your tenants live in the others. Everyone gets their own space. Now, you could also get a roommate setup or something similar and then share some of the main living areas. That's another example of how to house hack. The other option to house hack with is with an accessory dwelling unit or ADU. And that is what this video is really going to focus on. So what's an ADU? Entirely separate living space that's secondary to the main home. So it has its own entrance, the kitchenette, bathroom, sleeping space. So you don't really share anything except maybe a laundry space. That's pretty common. So what are some ways to house hack with an ADU? You might be able to buy a property that has an ADU already set up. You could convert space inside the structure to an ADU or even build one in the backyard. So some examples, converting a garage or bonus space, if you add a tiny home in the backyard, or even if your master suite has its own exterior entrance and enough space, this could be another way to create an ADU. Now, I know what you're wondering. I bet you have to have a lot of cash to house hack with an ADU. Nope. The strategy isn't just for investors or those with a ton of money. I will get into the money part later in the video. But people who are house hacking, first-time home buyers, singles, couples, empty nesters, retirees, anybody that has the right opportunity can house hack. Now, let's talk about 3 people that I know personally that are house hacking right now with an ADU. My godfather actually rents out the master suite in their home as an Airbnb. Once the kids moved out, they moved into the main house and their master suite became the rental. Now, the extra income they get, it lets them work less, and they actually got to retire a little bit earlier. Another person house hacking with an ADU is actually one of my clients. She lives in her backyard ADU and rents out her main house. So she actually makes $400 profit a month, even with a $2,000 mortgage. So the third person I know house hacking is my cousin. He actually rents out the kind of basement level, and that offsets their mortgage, which means they actually got to buy into a neighborhood they wouldn't have been able to afford otherwise unless they had a tenant offsetting some of their mortgage. So house hacking, it's already working for people like you. These people didn't know much about house hacking. I don't know if they even realized what they were doing. So if you or someone you know is house hacking, tell us in the comments. I really love to hear those house hacking stories. I want to give you a quick example of just how the numbers work, and we'll keep it simple. So let's say your mortgage is $2,000 a month. The ADU you rent out is $1,400 a month. So you get $1,400 a month from your tenant. That means that you're living in your house for $600 a month, still building equity. So can you imagine having a mortgage of $600 a month? That, for me personally, would be huge. So this is just an example of how those numbers work in its simplest form. How are you going to find a property to house hack with? Really, it's going to be homes with certain layouts. So ideally, if you can find a home with an existing ADU, totally golden. The split floor plan, if you've got a private master suite, it's got to have that separate entrance to the outside, or even places with basements, if you have a garage or a bonus room that you can convert into that ADU space. If you've got a home with a backyard that would fit a tiny home ADU, that could also be a strategy, but that's going to require a little bit different with the financials, which we'll also talk about. You really have to ask yourself when you're going through these properties, can you create separation and privacy without major renovations? That is the key question. Now let's talk about some tips when you're buying the house hack property. The best advice, work with a real estate agent who understands house hacking. Otherwise, they may let their fear of what they don't know talk you out of it. And they may not be able to see the potential in a property. You know, a real estate agent can help you check the zoning, check the rental rules. They can help you analyze the potential income and things like that. They could even come up with ideas on creating the ADU space inside that property, maybe even saving you money in the long run. It's really just a lot of strategy that goes into it, but you got to partner with an agent that gets it. A real estate agent is going to be a huge ally in this process. Some of the things you want to know before you start: know the local rules, check the city's laws, the county laws on renting out a space. They could have some verbiage on it, or they could not. Some places, they're super ADU friendly. Others might have strict short-term rental rules or even have specifics on long-term rental rules. So do the research before you purchase the property. You do not want to run into surprises later after you own the property and find out, oops, I can't do this with the property. Let's talk about how you're going to pay for it. Can I use a loan to house hack? The answer is yes, and you do not need 20% down. There are options where you may only need 3.5% down, and that's where a great lender becomes another partner in your house hacking journey. I want to introduce you to Miss Morgan Harris. She is with Guild Mortgage. She is our lending expert, and she's going to be talking about how to house hack with a loan. You know, house hacking is where you use part of your property for rental income. So, Miss Morgan, thank you for taking some time with us this morning.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
So, can somebody really house hack with 3.5% down? Tell us about that.
Yes, you can house hack with 3.5% down. With an FHA loan, you can buy anywhere from a 2 to 4 unit property with just 3.5% down, as long as you plan to occupy one of the units as your primary residence. From there, the rental income from the other units, so let's say you had a 4 unit, you're living in one, the other 3 units can be used to help offset your mortgage payment, which honestly just makes it one of the most accessible ways to start investing in real estate and having rental properties.
Is there any other type of loan that somebody would house hack with?
Absolutely. There are all types of loans for house hacking. FHA loans are great with the 3.5% down. You can also utilize a VA loan. A VA loan is for veterans. You can do 0% down if you qualify. These also allow for 2 to 4 units. They also have conventional loans. It really just depends on which program is going to best fit with you. Another tip is that you can actually do a renovation loan on these. You can also do things like 203K FHA renovation loans that will actually let you finance in the cost of the renovations into your mortgage, including building or upgrading an accessory dwelling unit or another unit. Do know if you're going to do any type of renovation loan, it's going to take time, right? It's not going to be 30 days or ready to roll. It's going to be a little bit more involved, but the payoff can be tremendous if you're willing to put in the work. So that's something else that people may or may not realize when they're trying to house hack, is that you can do a renovation loan too. Let's say their house didn't have any type of accessory dwelling unit. It was just a house, but they wanted to add one on using a 203K loan. That's something that we could talk about to see how much would it cost to build that. Let's get some detailed contractor bids, a HUD consultant. Let's also include what we think that unit could rent out for. It's a lot of work up front. It's one of those things that if you want to do it, it can be done so long as you're willing to put in the work and the effort. So I think that's a really cool tip that people should know as well.
You are so smart. That is why you are the lending expert. Why I go to you for this information because you're seeing it, you're doing it, your hands are probably getting dirty in the mix. And you did mention it has to be owner occupied. So you have to occupy some part of the property, either one of the units, or there's also the option of having a main house and then a secondary dwelling unit, an accessory dwelling unit, as an option to house hack. You have to occupy, is it a certain one? Does the lender care if I'm going to live in the ADU or the main house?
If you're looking at a house that does contain an accessory dwelling unit, more than likely you're going to have to live in the house because that's going to be your primary residence. And then the accessory dwelling unit is actually what's going to offset with potential rental income.
How much of that income can the borrower use? And how does that work with the numbers?
Great question. Let's say you have a duplex. Let's say your total note is $2,000. When you're looking at what will that other unit rent out for, that is not determined by anybody but the appraiser, which is not common knowledge. The appraiser actually goes in and determines what the fair market rent price is going to be. The appraiser comes back and says, yes, this other unit will rent for $1,000. The amount of money that can be utilized to offset that rent payment is going to be 75% of whatever the appraiser determines it is. Right. Out of that 1,000, it would be $750. Why? Well, because 25% goes to vacancy loss, maintenance, things like that typically people write off on their returns. So a way to kind of figure out, well, what could it rent for? Most of the time, great realtors like yourself will run a CMA, comparative market analysis, to get a roundabout ballpark idea of what that other unit will rent for.
Any other tips when someone's looking for a property? What are they going to need to provide you? What can they already start thinking about and gathering?
You'll need to gather things like pay stubs, W-2s, your most recent 2 years tax returns, bank statements. All of these things will allow me to verify what is going to be included on the loan application. If you're self-employed, we're definitely going to need some tax returns and a history of your self-employed income. Typically, the golden rule of thumb is 2 years.
Are you seeing a lot of people doing this?
Absolutely. I see it constantly. A lot of people are almost scared of it, right? They don't know what it entails. It's really just making that phone call and asking the right questions. The only way to alleviate fear in any type of purchase transaction is information. So that's basically where my role comes in, is just to provide you with all the information. And we also have to make sure that this is something not just that you can qualify for, but that you also understand what you're getting into. If this is your very first house and you've never been a landlord and you just want a house hack, but you don't necessarily know what that entails, it's also you and I's job to kind of come together and say, hey, I've got the financing side, but Erin, you might be showing them things like, okay, how can we rent out this property? How do we manage it? What does that look like? My wisdom to anybody out there is start asking questions and don't be afraid to, right? There's so much to know about real estate. It's not that it's super hard, but if you haven't come across it yet, you just don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So that is, Erin, your job and my job is to kind of be that expert to lean on to kind of cut through the noise. That's where we can come in and give you that expedited information, and also just from a real world perspective as well. That's where the human element comes in. It's something that we take very seriously. There's people who do this as a hobby, and then people like us who have this as a career and a passion, and will be doing this for a long time, right? So when you get to bring in that human element and that information, that's where two things come in. And I guess my advice would be is don't be afraid to ask. There is no dumb questions. Just start talking and asking questions and get comfortable with who you're working with. And my biggest thing that I tell my clients is, look, being in an uncomfortable spot or a place that you don't know, that's hard, right? But nothing's harder than staying there. There's nothing harder than not knowing where to go. Let's get a set game plan with tactical, measurable goals. Get a good plan, get good people on your side. So just that is my biggest advice. A lot of advice, but to cram it all in.
Yeah, no, I think that is key, because in the real estate journey, no matter where you're going, having the right people is going to be key. I know a lot of clients will reach out and they're like, I don't want to bother you. And I'm like, you're not bothering me. And they're like, well, what if this, what if that, what if that? I was like, those are what ifs. Let's work with facts.
Right.
Because I tell them, look, people's credit report, there's life on credit reports. Like, let's set up a game plan. It may take 12 months. You're going to have an actionable plan. And if you do it right, then it'll work. Having a lender who's willing to do a little hand holding for those who just don't know what they don't know. I know you have to run. If anyone has questions, I will leave your info so they can reach out. Thank you again for always being there for me to answer my questions no matter what time of day.
Anytime. And I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, because I can say the same, right? Just to you as a realtor, there are just some realtors who have that passion, and those are the people you kind of want in your corner, and somebody like you who's willing to step outside of comfort zones. There's not a lot of people even talking about what we're
Yeah,
talking about today.
no.
House hacking, accessory dwelling units, like this is something that you're passionate about, and it shows and it shines through. That is really, really cool and exciting for anybody who gets to experience a transaction with you, to see two good teams come together.
I appreciate you as always.
Anytime. Well, have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you. If you want more info on financing options for ADU, I'll link a video right here. There's a ton of information, even some that you may not have heard yet. So you know a good bit on house hacking, but I don't want to leave you with just the good part, because there are some downsides with house hacking. When you're house hacking, you're not just a homeowner anymore, you are a landlord. And so that means you could be dealing with things like repairs, late rent, you could have tenant issues. And sometimes when you're sharing a space, you could have some awkward situations. So it's not entirely passive, but it can be profitable if you're prepared. So careful tenant selection, it's gonna be huge. And you have to treat it as a small business. It's gonna take you work. You're gonna have to have some plans in place when those crazy things happen. Things will break. Let's talk about how to avoid the biggest mistake first-time house hackers make. Not running the numbers correctly. They're underestimating expenses, they're overestimating income. They get really excited. They might forget the real world stuff. What if a tenant moves out before the lease is up? What if the tenant completely trashes the place? What if a pipe burst, clogged toilet, AC stops working? Those are expenses that you do have to prepare for, because it's likely that that could happen. I don't want you to assume the rent's just gonna flow in like clockwork and then the expenses are gonna be minimal. It's not always the case. That is just what comes with being a landlord. We have humans involved. Sometimes craziness comes with humans, and that usually costs money, so you have to be prepared. This is not to make you run. It should make you be thorough. So here's some tips on what you can do to avoid some of those first-time mistakes. Run conservative numbers. Use the low-end rental estimates. Overestimate your expenses. Got to have a budget for repairs, maintenance, random surprises. You need to account for some vacancy. That's when a tenant maybe moves out and you haven't gotten one in the property just yet. Conservative numbers, it's gonna be your biggest weapon in the financial part of house hacking. I cannot stress that enough. So to wrap it up, there are a lot of ways to house hack, but house hacking with an ADU gives you the perfect balance of privacy, income, and long-term value. So I'm excited. Are you ready to house hack? Tell me about your house hacking goals. If you have a particular question on house hacking or anything else related to ADUs, tiny homes, leave it in the comment. I may be able to make a video around your question. If you're interested in more videos that'll help you with ADUs and tiny homes, I'll link a playlist right here. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, subscribe. I really like to provide content that is useful to the viewers. And don't forget to visit rearon.com. I've got lots of articles on ADUs, tiny homes, and just anything you want to know. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.